Good evening, and welcome to this episode of the Formula Podcast. I am your friendly host, Trevor Carlson. On the Formula, I interview people from all over the world on their different perspectives in life, their habits, routines, and experiences that have led them to building the life that they have now. On this episode, I get the opportunity to interview SafetyWing founder, Sondre Rasch. On this episode, we talk about the challenges of starting SafetyWing, his advice for anyone starting a nomadic lifestyle, and a whole bunch more. I personally really enjoyed this interview and found that Sondre's perspectives on living a remote work lifestyle and that approach to the future of business, found it very refreshing and insightful, and I hope you do too. The sound is a little messed up because of the Riverside recording software we used kind of had a bit of an error, unfortunately, and didn't quite get my voice as well as I would like to, but you can hear all of Sondre's insights, no problem. So sorry about that, and I'll make sure and do a better job next time. Anyways, without me rambling on any further, let's get started with this episode of the show. Thanks for taking the time to drop in today, and really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you, Trevor. It's great to be talking with you here. You're calling in from North India, bucket list item. I'm very, very excited to be talking to you from San Francisco.
Yeah, man. Yeah, like I was saying before we started recording, North India is just quite unbelievable. But I feel like with your experience at SafetyWing, you've probably had the chance to travel like previously, and since you've been running the company. But can you give me kind of the what was the inspiration behind SafetyWing? How did you come up with it? And maybe, I guess,
SafetyWing, the purpose of the company is to build a global social safety net and a country on the internet. That was how it was founded. And the inspiration came from, so I had a previous company called Superside, which was sort of like a design freelancer platform. And at some point we explored getting benefits for the freelancers on the platform and found that nobody offered it. And we sort of realized that what was happening there was that sort of remote work or internet labor market, the world is one big globe. But in the old world, there are countries and they have their own infrastructure. So, in a company like SafetyWing, where we have people working here from 70 different countries, then the old systems doesn't work. So we reasoned, so someone has to build a globalized digital alternative for things like a social safety net. And so that's what we set out to do. That was the problem discovery and the inspiration. And the country on the internet, that was just because we realized right the day we came up with this idea that if we were to make a global social safety net, that might become more something like the first country on the internet than a regular company, because of the type of services it is. And yeah, here we are 5 years in, and this vision is being realized slowly but surely.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. First, you said the first company on the internet?
First country on the internet.
First country on the internet. Yeah. So how does it go from being like a startup company or a travel insurance company to the first country on the internet?
Yeah. And I should add, I don't have a particular attachment to the first. Actually, there are some other cool projects building country-like services on the internet, and we very much support them. So a country on the internet. How do you go from here to there? Well, I mean, we asked the question the other way around, right? Which was, we want to make a global social safety net and a country on the internet, but here we are and we have nothing. How do we go from here to there? And our reasoning was, if we build one product and then we get customers and investments and credibility, one product that is for like a ring within the kind of broader ring of the internet labor market, for a product that is within the kind of services that would belong in a social safety net, and then we use that to finance the next step, then an order of magnitude more complicated, to finance the next step in order of magnitude more complicated. So this was basically our our way to bootstrap our way up. And this has worked, right? So we started out with Nomad Insurance, which is today still our kind of core product, right? For digital nomads. I've been a digital nomad. Yeah, the founders we knew this aspect very well. It's an influencer group. It's the people who kind of first discovered working on the internet and the freedom that can come from that, because you can live anywhere. And so like that group of digital nomads have pioneered so many of the services of the modern age. So it's like a lot of the stuff that is becoming like changing our world was actually made for digital nomads, including things that are now mainstream, like co-working and co-living was first done by the nomads. So that's interesting. And so we made Nomad Insurance, and that basically worked, right? So it's like we grew Nomad Insurance. We then got customer-based credibility to make remote health like more of a health insurance that also works in home country. And then we built stuff, and we're just now setting up our own carrier, which is a license thing, but that allows us to potentially then make the rest of the products towards the social safety net. In parallel with this, and what do we mean by the end of the social safety net? So that's like, imagine that you're a member of like this digital community, and there's a membership fee, and part of that is all these like products, like income protection, retirement, health, etc. It won't be like a regular country does it, of course, because it will be voluntary, so it'll be more like a product. But those kinds of services that we today associate with countries in most places. And then in parallel with that, we have this project, Plumia, which starts out as sort of like a separate project, but we have a shared unification in the future. So, Plumia is a project to build the internet country, the passport, and that we would then, and that's already started and has made an amazing progress with the effort that has been made, led by Lauren Rosavi. And then we sort of merged those two together, 5 to 10 years down the line, to the full citizenship as a service. That's how we get from here to there.
Yeah. So did Plumia come out? Was that something that came out really like after these? So like you've rolled out your first few products, like the Nomad Insurance, health insurance for like groups and companies. Plumia just like, was that on the roadmap, or is that something that's been kind of an evolution based on how like technology changed, or you know what I'm trying to say? Was that in the plan at the beginning, or is that something else?
It was actually in the plan. It was just moved up the roadmap due to COVID. So the way we view COVID when it happened was, this is going to accelerate the adoption of remote work, which means that everything we predict will come true faster. And so because we were thinking to like complete the social safety net before we started working on Plumia, but that was like years in the future, we thought maybe the timing would be off because it's going to take so long to do it. So that's why we started work on Plumia sooner. But no, it was in the original idea. And I guess it's like worth exploring like why. Like, why does a global social safety net and a country on the internet, why does it need to be built now? I think it's actually inevitable. Why will it be? And it's because, it's basically like our world had changed. This is all downstream from the internet, essentially, making us into, a global community. We are all, where we are transacting, traveling, moving, living anywhere on the planet. So the sort of social organization has to match the reality that it's in, the technological reality that it is in. And so this is already the reality that we're in. And we have to then, build social institutions that match that and that work for the time that we're in. And, the two of the use cases that we have on our website, they're just examples, actually. They're not the whole thing. They're just examples. The digital nomad, the fact that I'm from Norway, when I'm here in San Francisco, I can't access the Norwegian social safety net, obviously, right? And if I was just on a 2-week holiday, that wouldn't be like a bug, right? But being a nomad and like I'm actually not on a 2-week holiday, that actually means that the system isn't working anymore. So that's an obsoleteness. And similar with remote teams, SafetyWing's a remote company, employees in 70 different countries. They cannot access the Norwegian social safety net, right? A remote employee, from another country than Norway, I don't know, in North India, cannot make use of any of those services. So that's the thing, it's obsolete. So for these use cases, it doesn't work anymore.
So what's next on the roadmap?
So we've been working for a good while on retirement and remote doctor. Although, and with each of these, the hardest part, and in some sense, like the differentiator, sorry to jump forward there, but is the global part. That's always the hardest part about what we do, and our approach is slightly different. So the kind of crypto scene and digital nomad scene, they're right next to each other, and there's a lot of overlap. But we're choosing a strategy that is slightly different than many other projects. We're essentially slightly more friendly to the old order, I would say. So we are actually very positive. Like we're trying to tilt the competitive dynamic between countries in a positive direction. And I actually think this will be very important for how painful the transition will be. So, we, of course, like we do all proper licensing, working with governments and figuring out how to make these products globally is the hardest part. Is actually that part. So figuring out that with retirement and doctor is next on the roadmap.
I have so many questions about this because I feel like that, like when you travel around like the digital nomad hotspots or places, you to find people that are working on like, I don't want to say like, when I say fringe technology, it sounds way more sci-fi than it actually is. It's just more like they're working on something in crypto or whatever. So it's interesting you said like digital nomads kind of like lead some of these things. Like there's innovations that come up, like make space for them. I mean, for probably back in like 2015 or so, there was like traveling around, there was very few co-working spaces, and now like everywhere you go, like there's even I'm in a village of less than 1,000 people, and there's 2 co-working spaces here. So it's like it's wild, and it's like how it's adopted globally is also like wild. Like, when you think of like where I'm at right now, and the fact that like I have just as good internet here as like my home in the United States, and then I also have co-working spaces here. It's like it's something you would really maybe in the past you would have expected here. So it's like things where like people in India are going to be co-working and they're like digital nomad in the United States, and they're going to be away from their scene too. This isn't just going to be like a Western society thing. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's like the general feeling.
No, you're totally right. It is a global thing, and we see that in our user base as well. We have slightly higher share compared to population of like Americans and Europeans, but it's there's digital nomads from every country in the world now, and that's because it is possible. The internet is like its own labor market that you can move to just by getting a computer, in a way. So like in the past, to go to like a different country that had better economic opportunity, it was like arduous journey. But now you just log on and you're there, and it is indeed available. Of course, it takes some work to get the skills to have to have good value in that labor market. But it is possible. It is available to anyone, and more people are realizing that. And I find that is, of course, one of the really great things about it, is that it's like the internet is this like new land that we've built that is the current frontier, and that everyone is invited to. And I think it's really good, obviously, for making opportunity available for a lot of people. And the kind of digital nomad life, I think, is so great. I am so thrilled to like live in a time where that's a thing young people can do, because it's so cool, and it's like it's really nice. Like, it can be real. Of course, it has its challenges, but of things to do, it's like it's a pretty cool life.
So were you a digital nomad before you started SafetyWing?
Yeah.
So what was your experience like being a digital nomad around? Where did you go, and tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my style was like living 3 months different places at a time, renting a place, often together with other people, sometimes in co-living houses. Tilted a bit towards like founders and stuff, wherever I can find that. No, I mean, there is some adjustment to a new place, and then you start to love it. And you get to know them, and each place is pretty unique. Like, once you get a bit under the hood, which is amazing. Like, just there's a depth to the difference that you can't see as a tourist. As a tourist, you sort of just see the surface tourist layer, which is actually quite flat. Like it's the same across countries, but living somewhere is not the same. Of course, some places are particularly unique. Some of my favorites are Berlin, Tulum. Maybe Tulum is getting overcrowded now, but also, yeah. But it's still good. Yeah. So that's one thing. A lot of people talk about loneliness, like, because of course you can't take with you. You have the internet network, right? And people have internet jobs. It's not like you're disconnected, but you don't bring with you all your friends to the new location. And people are getting better and better at this, and nomads are really easy to get to know with. I didn't find this particularly challenging, although it is certainly true that you do disconnect and you have to restart a bit. Every new place, especially if you travel alone.
True. Yeah, I feel like maybe that's something that comes with experience though too, where where if you go to a new place, it might take you a little bit of time first time you're there, but once you kind of move around enough, you're just like, oh yeah, I just need to like go to like the co-working space and go to like an event, and I'll make friends there, or like talk to somebody, be like, hey, who's working on something interesting here, and there's volunteer organizations. There's a lot of ways. I just feel like maybe it's an experience thing where it's also very easy to just kind of get sucked into your laptop wherever you are, and just like really, especially when you're working on something you care about, and then the next thing you know, like a week, 2 weeks have gone by, and you're I don't have any friends in this new place. So it's a little bit of, it's like I don't know, it's a double-edged sword where like sometimes you can be very, very productive in a new place, but it can also be very like isolating as well, because you don't have anyone there asking you to do anything.
Yeah, I very much agree with that, by the way. Like, almost every place, the game changer is going to some kind of event, often a nomad event, actually. Like if there is one, I can remember in Berlin, which I mentioned already, was like, I think, going to DNX in 2014, 15. Life changer. I got some best friends I still have to this day. And digital nomads are good friends because they expect you to move around, and you can catch up with them other times.
Yeah. Dude, it is wild how you just kind of run into, and like all the digital nomads I know tend to go to the same, they go to the generally the same places in different countries, and randomly running into people like it's a very strange experience where I was in like I met this group in Belgrade, Serbia back in like 2018, and in 2022 I was in San Cristobal, Mexico, in this like vegan cafe, and I saw them walk by, and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, so it's people tend to go like people who move around like in the digital nomad thing, they have like certain requirement. I feel like
Yeah.
there's only a certain number of cities in each country that really can provide them that. So you're more likely to run into people meet, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Uh so on a separate note to kind of talk a bit more about like entrepreneurship, innovation. Um what you're doing sounds like a very very ambitious and like I think it's awesome. But what are some of the challenges that you're facing like trying to do something like this big, and how are you working to overcome those?
Yeah. Um, yeah. One challenge that um, is that you kind of like you have to succeed at each next step, and sometimes you have to have a story that is about the next step. Um, and this can be quite hard to come up with. So this is particular to if you think about fundraising, right? So when we applied to Y Combinator, we just went gung ho and just said like the whole thing, and thankfully they thought that was great. But later, when we start talking to more like regular investors, they didn't get it, and so I had to like basically explain the next product, right? So it has to be, for example, the first one is all about nomad insurance, right? And and yeah, and but internally, like we're like on this massive journey. But we sort of have to then look to the next thing right in front of us, and be able to focus on that and succeed with that. And it is indeed necessary, right? Because we have to succeed to get to the next step to get all the way. But yeah, this is the challenge of working it is to have this overall plan, and then to kind of balance that thing about succeeding with the step where you're at without getting stuck there. Right? It's also quite easy to go a bit too far in that direction, where you're like, you focus on it so intensely that you forget the big quest. And so yeah, I would say that's one particular challenge to SafetyWing, and I think to many other projects that are ambitious like that, just storytelling. But yeah, I find that investors are, in a way, customers are more. It's funny, but people often wonder if customers are like more easy to talk about big visions than investors. It's so strange because investors say they love that all the time, and they should, but I find it that they get a bit puzzled and find it much easier to just say, look, here's our product, here's what it's for, and here's like how it's growing. Like, there's nothing more to know.
That is kind of ironic because a lot of investors, they're like I want to invest in innovation and like next big thing, and then you're like, well, here it is, and you're like what? But what? Okay, well, what is that?
Yeah.
It's like, well, innovation looks confusing.
Yeah. It does look confusing because it's not in a category.
Trying to decide which direction I want to go with this, because I'm trying to decide which way I want to go with this. I want to ask more about like your experience as an entrepreneur, but I'm also very curious about the process of just like uh building a country on the internet, and also like so Plumia is considered that that's like that main project, right? That's the goal with Plumia.
That's the goal of SafetyWing. Yeah, I mean, I would say SafetyWing and Plumia together is the goal of SafetyWing. So Plumia, because the end state, right, is that you merge the social safety net, which is complete, with online citizenship, and it becomes a membership that's also a citizenship. So Plumia has been, quite a really interesting journey already. One of the amazing successes, just to explain, that we've had with Plumia already is this idea of the nomad visas, which will become with the nomad border pass. So just to explain what happened here. So back in 2019, I believe, this was one of the things that my co-founder, said from, I think it was the stage of Web Summit. And she was like, oh yeah, the nomads, they're choosing cities like products, and cities and countries will start to compete for these like citizens and internet companies. And there will be like, they will make like there will be nomad visas. And she said these things, and someone listened to this talk in Barbados in 2020 and was like, nomad visas, that's great, because COVID had hit and they lost their tourism. And so this guy, and I had on our podcast, and he told the story. He then went to his government and wrote this proposal, like, we should make nomad visas. We can get these like digital nomads to come to Barbados. And then they just did it, right? In the urgency of early COVID, they just implemented this thing. And that worked out really well for them. And they got a lot of press, and and people came there. I have several friends who went there. So it totally worked as well. And then other countries started copying them in a big way. And the great thing when they copied them is they also copied the rules of the visa. And this will become very important, turns out, later in the story. They copied the rules of it. And that rules of it is like the first visa that actually doesn't look at any like origin country criteria in any way, which is like, that's great. It has income threshold, but that's it. So, and now I think it's like something like 60 something countries have implemented this. Last spring, Lauren, we were invited. We went talking to the United Nations in front of all countries about this, and we're working on this project now called the Nomad Border Pass, which is the idea that, imagine that you could go to our website, apply one place, and then you got visa to like all the countries. Do you see what I mean?
That's very convenient. Very helpful.
It's very convenient. Processed by like, an efficient, high customer service entity. And of course, for the countries themselves, like they're trying to succeed here, right? So we've really achieved this like positive competition. It's like, here's a new thing, two ways countries can respond. One is like, oh, threat, stop, illegal, right? Or they're like, oh, opportunity, here we can succeed, here we can get more, long-term tourists. Here we can get knowledge workers who don't compete for local jobs. Here we can get jobs, right, in the form of remote companies. And, and that's how it's that attitude that will succeed, because of course, no country at this point can stop the internet. You're not going to get that toothpaste back in the tube. So
it's some countries certainly try, or not countries. Some companies are certainly trying to turn back time on remote work, though, which I think is kind of hilarious and a bad move.
Yeah, actually. I was just overhearing this big fight they're having now at Amazon, because my wife works there, and this is, I think, the third time they're trying. And every time they've kind of rolled it back after like mass resignations, and people become very upset. And it's for the same reasons why these other companies. So I should explain, because this does confuse a lot of people. It's like, oh, does the fact that some companies are trying to, does that somehow end remote work, or mean that it's a fad? That I get this question a lot. You wouldn't ask it, of course, but I do get it. And I would explain like, no, like this is, you know, we've jumped like 5 years ahead of the adoption curve. Like nobody thought it would stay at peak lockdown, right? I mean, that's nobody thought that. So the fact that like we're going down from that peak, but the point is that what we're going down to is still like 5x to 10x like higher than it was pre-COVID. So there has been an acceleration, but this trend is actually stretches back to like late 90s. If you look at it, it's like a smooth exponential. But yeah, in their case, they have the same issue that some of these other big companies did, which is that they went remote for like years. They've been hiring all jobs with location remote, and they've had remote jobs, meaning, and then like a third to half of their workforce have moved, right? This is the problem with these people on Jonah's team, is like this guy, yeah, but he doesn't live in Seattle anymore. He lives in Kansas, and he's lived there for 3 years. So, right. And that's not a one or two people. That's a significant share that didn't stay there. They just live there because of their work. So, you know, there's this like endless upheaval. And then, of course, you have the new applicants and the like great people. What are you going to do with those? So the issue you have there is, of course, that the teams who are remote will win in the end. You know, I saw this LinkedIn data that I think it was 20% of jobs posted there who were remote got 80% of the applicants or something. It was like a very large share of the applicants goes to it. People prefer it. So if a company goes not remote, you know, they can do that. But it's kind of like trying to build a company in that village you're in of 1,000 people, which is just, well, but you're going to have a smaller pool. You're not going to be as big of a pool. Which is eventually going to be a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you can either have access to like everybody in your time zone or in the United States, that's your pool, or your pool is everyone that lives in New York. Like, how are you going to get the best people? And the people who live in New York, maybe they want to work remote half the time too. So you're probably cutting down. You know, what do you? Yeah, I don't know. I have two questions for you. One is, what do you tell the people who run these companies when they're like, well, we feel like, you know, maybe we want to bring people back in the office, and then like where do you see this going in like the next, you know, 5 years?
Well, what I would say if I were to talk to the, you know, Andy Jassy guy at Amazon, that I would explain first the logic of the labor market and how it's not going to work. And then, and that's just like logic, like that's just incontrovertible. That's just correct. But then the next question is, how do you do that? I think a lot of companies have underestimated how big they need to change, because a remote company that is internet first is fundamentally different. It's almost like a refounding of the management and running of the company. So I would take it with that level of seriousness. I would see it as a refounding of the organization, but it obviously can be done, right? If you look at like the Y Combinator top list, like most of the new companies that have gone up there, like Rex, us, Deal, many, like 200 of them, like almost all of them are fully remote from day one, even pre-COVID. GitLab, GitHub, there's a long list. And so you can build super successful, rapidly growing companies, but you got to do it on purpose. And I understand that they're like many others, like they're kind of keeping all their old systems still, kind of just like honkering along as if they were in the office, but they're not. And it's a bit awkward. So yeah, so I would say, look, obviously Amazon wants to succeed and be a successful company in like the next 50 years, right? Not just like this year for your stockholders, correct? And he would probably say yes. And then I would say, well, here's the deal. Like this is the labor market of the future and we're already in it, and you want to be a high productivity company, would you agree like the quality of the people is like one of the top drivers of productivity? And he would say yes. And he would say, well, do you agree that there's a difference of how big a labor market, to how great people you can find? And he would obviously say yes to that. So it's like, look, the logic is incontrovertible. Like, don't fight this, succeed here, like, and refound your company to be successful in the new age. You were started as an internet company. This is more possible for you than like a lot of other kind of shops that are even older than that.
Yeah. Why do you think they want them to come back into the office? I think it's like they feel like people aren't being productive. It's like a control thing. It's like they have real estate investment of the office. Do you have theories on that?
Yeah, actually, I do have a theory. It's actually a very concerning sign for Amazon itself, because what it is, where I think it comes from, is not a particular concern. It's like mimetic. So I'm noticing, if you go back a few months, there was this like story floating around among like mediocre people, normies as they would be called, which was, hey, look, Twitter and Tesla went back to the office, and that means it's a fad, right? And now everyone is going to go back to the office and like come rent my office in San Francisco. I remember I talked to this guy, and the thing is like that spread, and then that got a hold. So you can imagine like people who just repeat things and don't think for themselves in the Amazon leadership organization, they would be repeating this, and then it would just become like established fact. And then they start to think like, oh, actually, like the right thing to do now, quote unquote, best practice, which is what people like zombies and corporations, mean when they mean something I didn't, and I'm just copying, is to actually go back to the office now. I think it was just that. And then it's just like, it's just snowballed. And at some point, I guess the Andy Jassy saw this proposal and he was like, can't stop it now, I guess. Right. So, he it's like a good idea. So, and then they just did it. Right. And now, and of course, a bit, all house is breaking loose. But in terms of like, so that's, I think, what happened. But in terms of like what arguments they will make for justification, which is almost like a separate question than the causal question, for justification, what do they say? I mean, they all say the same thing. I keep forgetting.
It almost feels like they don't even know why. Like I don't know. It's like I feel like I saw a tweet from Elon Musk that said like people who are working remote aren't working at all or something like that, or like they're just being lazy. And maybe people hear things like that and they just automatically assume. But I mean, I don't know if there's any actual data to back that up.
No, I mean, there is quite a bit of data that goes the other direction. So I haven't seen that, and I certainly haven't seen that as part of like the latest discourse. And of course, even Twitter, I don't know if you know, but like they also like halted their back to the office program in like stages. Like first they said no, all good employees can stay remote, and then they were like, well, actually, maybe if you really want to, but then you got to work hard, and they're like majority remote still. So that basically never happened. Yeah, the origin of all this confusion actually was also halted.
Oh, I didn't even know that, which is kind of hilarious because it was like such a big deal that Twitter was going to go back into the office, and I never heard anything that they didn't go. So I think it's kind of funny. I mean, all of it to me, like I've been full-time remote. Like I have my own small business. Been working remote for like 4 5 years now, and even before that was like, I mean, I worked for another company, and I would just leave because I just needed it on my laptop. And it's like to think that we could ever go, especially when so many people experienced how nice it is to not have an hour an hour commute both ways every day. People are able to see their kids. People are able to like, um, do their laundry in the middle of the day or like eat at home. Like to imagine that there's a world where people can go backwards to like not having those things once they've had them for like a year or two. I just feel like that's people are going to be very productive in order to keep the things that they really like. At least I feel.
No, I 100%. I mean, there is a transition, and people have to find it, and it is true that you do need more self-management. Like you do need some different skill to succeed in remote work. I would say you need slightly less kind of smooching social skills, and you need slightly more self-management skills. But yeah, I mean, just by the way, to explain how that it did hit some news when Twitter did the U-turn, because the way the news was presented was Twitter was closing its offices. Which they did end of January.
Oh,
it's in those stories.
Okay.
You can read it. So if you zoom into those stories, you're like, they said it was going wrong, but actually it turns out they can cut costs. So closing now at Seattle, and two-thirds of its offices, and as part of this like cost cutting effort.
So I read that article too. I didn't even think about that. Like, I just assumed that they had lost so many people they just closed the offices. And it's kind of funny how they like twist that when they report it. They don't ever really say like, oh, actually we changed our mind. People aren't going remote anymore. They're gonna be we decided we could save more money by closing the offices because if they do it and that gets run, just imagine what happens to all these other companies who, as you said, some of them don't necessarily think for themselves. They might look at their offices and be like, oh wow, we can we can cut a major cost here too. How are you doing on time, by the way?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I just sent you one of them there. I mean, I just quickly Googled it, but yeah, I mean that one has a lot of it, and that one also cites some of those studies, which is this weird thing that on those few studies that have been done, they actually point in the other direction, which is that remote workers are slightly more productive.
Yeah, what was that like for you when you became a remote worker? Did you feel like you were more productive?
See, that's a good question. Pre-remote work, my experience of working is like many others, which was that I wasn't really working that much, but I felt like I didn't really have to because I did go into the office, and I'm also like pretty good at sprints. Like I can get a lot done very quickly. So it's kind of like at school, like I was basically able to make up for it by doing a lot of things sometimes. and then remote work, well, I one of my key motivations for becoming a nomad and stuff when getting online freelance job and stuff was the freedom to move. And in the beginning, and I also wanted to start a startup. In the beginning, it was actually quite hard. So I think I spent a couple of years almost just like cycling through like self-management practices until I had one that worked. So, I mean, I remember one big change, which came, oh my gosh, this is actually 3 years in, was when I learned that I should work in a different place than where I rest. So, and this was such a mind, like, because I used to sit on this couch a lot because I was like sitting in couches, and then I would work, and so many distractions. Like so often would I think about just doing going down some rabbit hole. But when I then use two physical locations, the distraction stopped because I'm like over at workspace. So yeah, so there was like many small things like that I just gradually got in. Getting to really use Google Calendar well, and scheduling stuff. So that also was a big one. But yeah, I basically had to learn these habits, right? And I was on my own startup, like nobody's telling what to do. Nobody's waiting for anything. So I had to figure this stuff out. And it did take me a couple of years.
Yeah, that like different spaces for different activities is a huge one because I I think during lockdown times I got in a really bad habit of like being on my laptop all the time because I just was bored. And I'd like on the couch, like sometimes laying in bed, like we're doing work like that. And I've had once I started making that habit where I'm like, okay, like no laptops in my bedroom. Like I go to a cafe to work, or I go to this other room to work. It's a very big difference because it's easy when you're trying to work in your room, just like pop open Netflix and be like, all right, well, I'll just watch one episode, and then then it's 2 or 3 hours later, and and you haven't got anything done. What do you think, like, did you have any others that really stood out to you? Any other like self-management techniques?
Yeah, I mean, one that was a pretty huge difference for me when I started it, although it hasn't continued to be, was when I, in a moment of inspiration or desperation, I put on this like thing with something called Beeminder, and I could connect it to my to-do list thing, which I also started to use at the same time. And I put on this rule that if I didn't cross off 10 to-dos per week, then it would like deduct money from my account. And then it was like doubling every week or something, I think it was. So yeah, after a while, I had to get my to-dos down because this software was really hard to turn off once you turn it on. So that's more of a comical one. I'm not sure I would recommend it, but it did kick me into gear, and I then got on this kind of treadmill of keeping my to-do list open, looking at it, actually checking things off, as opposed to just something I wrote and forgot about it, which it used to be before then. So yeah, so that was another one that was quite nice. Let's see if I can think of anyone else. Zero Inbox. I don't know if you've tried Zero Inbox, but Zero Inbox was very nice. Before Zero Inbox, I used to have this very chaotic mail thing. So I implemented this. So it's like I have batches where I do communications, and I go to Zero Inbox. And so Zero Inbox means that the way you get started with it is you basically just archive your whole inbox, by the way, without looking at it, if you're wondering. And then I just take every day, I go through the email. The ones that I don't do, like they either go into a to-do or they get like punted. But I basically process each email in a fast way, and then get to zero. Like, I'm not talking about answering every, but it's just that those that take a while, I do something with so that they're no longer in the email, and that allows you to sort of just feel done and stay a bit on top of this.
Yeah, that's one. The other two I've done for, well, not I've done like the monetary thing, but not with software, with like friends, where it's like, hey, if I don't turn this in, like send me PayPal requests or something. And that can get very expensive. Like, I've done it with working out, and that can get very expensive if you miss a few days. So
social things are so good. Have you tried? What is that one called where you're sitting with a stranger? Oh, well, you have it in the company. It's called.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going to say. It's like co-working with somebody on a site, and you're just like kind of keeping each other accountable as you're working.
Yeah, you're matched. We actually have it for the whole team in the company, and we use it something on T, I think. But yeah, you're kind of like, you start the hour, you tell the stranger what you're going to do this hour, and then it's just like in a minute, and then you work on it, and then at the end you say, how you did. And yeah, this, like, using all the social tricks of the human brain. I think there's actually a lot more innovation to do there. Like, that's such a hack. Like to stay focused on whatever you want to be focused on.
In the last couple of years, I've invested a lot more in masterminds, and they usually do like a weekly like co-work session where everybody kind of just jumps on and mutes themselves, and then like we'll like say, okay, this is what I did, so I'm working on, and if anybody's in there, then they will like, if you have a problem, somebody can help you out. And I found actually that that's been extremely helpful because they're like, the person who runs it's like, everybody has to keep their camera on. You're not allowed to like leave during the Coke session.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's always like, hey, well, if you didn't get this done, why didn't you done?
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of have like a public accountability with people that you meet with every week who are down to call you out. So that's another.
I love that. That sounds really appealing, actually. In a weird way. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. if you have like, if you can just answer a question like 3 seconds, anybody's aspiring entrepreneur getting started, if I had like 3 quick pieces of advice for somebody who wants to start their own company, what would those 3 things be?
I would say, the first one is to just get started and make rapid decisions. When I see people who are considering starting and then they don't, it's because they dwell too long on decisions. But you just want to make like 10 a day, rapid fire up, name, website, domain, do it. Just get it done, because it's just so unlikely to get something off the ground that's the only really, you have to do that. And then number 2, I would say focus on making a product people love first before you try to scale it. This is a mistake I did, where you learn about performance ads and you're like, this is amazing. And then but that's its own little learning curve. So before you have a product that you've observed someone recommending to a friend, like organically, I wouldn't, just continue. I would almost consider it your beta phase until you're there. And just so you give it a name. And then you just focus on improving the product and talking to users and improving the product. And then number 3, this is a stupid one, but I apply to Y Combinator. That was a really life changer for me, frankly. Being in the startup environment in Norway and just coming over here was really fantastic. To have great peers and mentors, and it's a really cool place. So would recommend that.
Yeah, I think those are. I'm like taking notes as I'm listening. So how can I improve what I'm can? Yeah, cool, man. No, I think those are great pieces of advice, and I really appreciate your time jumping on the show today. I learned a lot. I think anybody whoever's listening hopefully learns a few things too, and if they're traveling around, they should definitely check out SafetyWing for nomad insurance. Because every question I've had, you have to give your customer service team credit. They are extremely helpful, and they're always able to answer any question I have very quickly. So props to them.
Thanks, Trevor. It's been great.
Well, that is a wrap for this week's show. Really appreciate you taking the time to tune in, listen to Sondre and I's conversation about what it's like to build a company and the present/future of remote working. If you found this show to be helpful, please head over to iTunes or whatever podcast app that you're listening to this on and give us a review. It'd be really helpful. It helps people like you find our show and helps give me a little boost of motivation to continue making these episodes. So a little review would be quite helpful. That's pretty much all I got. I have a lot of new episodes coming out. It's got different book reviews, interviews with directors, documentary filmmakers, things like that coming up on the agenda. So very excited to share those with you. But that's a wrap, and look forward to you tuning in next time. Ciao.